Your favorite toy truck nerds are back. Welcome to That Scale RC Show.
Whoa, Travis disappeared.
It killed Travis.
It's like Travis was there. Oh, we almost need that South Park.
I'm gonna do it again.
God,
Maybe it'll kill me.
They killed Travis.
That is so funny. Perfect timing. Maybe he thought it was longer than it really is.
Yeah,
He's gone.
he's gone.
He's gone.
In the meantime, what's up?
No, nothing. Just living. That's
Living
about
the
it.
dream. Living the dream, one nightmare at a time.
Pretty much. Yep. Schultz was up here 2 weekends ago, and we did the whole rallycross thing and had the associated booth. And that was pretty fun. We got to catch up and talk about stuff, and so that was. Oh, there he is.
There he is.
He's back, everybody.
We thought the dragon killed you.
Little headphones. There he is.
No, I got scared.
Yeah, the video came. The video ended, and you were just gone.
Yeah, dramatic effect. Yeah, I use the restroom real fast.
Dipped out. It worked. We were concerned.
Cool. Well, what's up?
Nothing. Another we're I don't know about you guys, but we're getting hit with like this really weird weather pattern. We had overcast mornings until today, and then that's when I knew that it was gonna be a warm one, and by the afternoon it was 91. But then as soon as the sun starts going down, which we can tell it's starting to go into fall, it just dramatically drops. And last time I checked, it was like 78 degrees out.
Yeah, it got cold here too. Then same thing. It's been like super overcast in the mornings, and then in the afternoon it gets sunny, but it's still kind of chilly, like sweatshirt weather.
Yeah, not quite sweatshirt weather for us yet, but I know that we're gonna get hit with some heat waves soon, just because that's always how it works for us now.
I think ours is done. I think we're down to highs of like 89. It looks like for the next 10 days. But the next 3 gonna be 68, 70, 83. Yeah, so it's starting to calm down a bit.
Yeah, and didn't you guys just get hit with rain?
Kind of. I mean, we get a daily storm for about 2 hours that is just crazy, but otherwise it kind of just goes back to the heat.
Okay, yeah, I have some buddies that live in Colorado Springs, so they were, at least that's what they were saying. They were like,
it changes a lot along the front range. Like if I go out of my apartment sometimes and I'll look north, sort of like Fort Collins or Cheyenne, like I'll see like they get storms way worse than we do, and they're like maybe an hour north of us, and I can see it. And so I think Colorado Springs is kind of a similar situation where they're just like all three of us are on completely different programs.
yeah.
It's super
It's
weird.
like 65 now, and it's supposed to be mid 70s is the highest it'll get this week, which I'm cool with.
I wish that's what we were getting.
Yeah. So Adam, you had an axial, didn't you?
Yep. So I gotta look at a calendar, but I believe it was like 2 weeks ago. 2 weekends ago, I think. We had Axialfest West up at Rob's Resort. It was a pretty cool time. It was a lot of fun. The only gripe that I have is, and I got to be very honest about this, like I think the G crew who sets up the trail, I really think they need to spend a little more time setting up trail, because this year through like the forest area was very just like kind of like spread out. And then like you were almost like to the point where like you're like, okay, where are we going now? And you had to like hunt for the next area, but it wasn't really like obstacles or anything you were going over. I mean, almost every forest trail had some sort of tree that you crawled across the top for like 20 feet. And I just think that the forest needs to be a little groomed, or, bring in something like, bring in a couple more boulders, or just, a couple more like exciting factors, to that area. But Elio and his group actually did this like center trail through the center of Rob's, almost like right by the it's not the pavilion, but like where they have the award ceremony and all that stuff. And like they brought in, I don't know how many tons of rock. And I mean, that trail was super scale, a lot of fun. They had the bridges, they had their little last chance gas station thing set up. I mean, it was a lot of fun. So I think I've tried to have this talk with him. Like, we need to implement that kind of, scaleness to the rest of the trail. And I think it'd be a lot of fun. So, yeah, no bears this year. So that was a plus.
That's too bad.
Well, it's, I think last year was actually just kind of like a weird freak thing. Like, I don't think, I think it did scare off a couple people, because the one thing I regret not doing this year was last year I took a picture staring out at the field where everyone was parked. And this year I didn't do it. But like last year, you had like almost the whole field was filled. This year, they like stayed more in the center and closer to the actual, like, I guess, center of Rob's Resort, instead of staying out on the perimeter. And I wonder if that had to do with people being scared, because the outer perimeter was what got hit first by the bear. So I wonder if
they
they
were
just
circling the wagons.
Yeah. So I think they're like, oh, we're going to stay in closer, and we're not going to stay out. But yeah, I didn't hear one complaint about any bears. So yeah.
We found bear poop at Dirtfish that weekend, because I think Axialfest the same weekend that I had raced last, and there was a bear cruising around Dirtfish's property.
Yeah, no, we didn't. No bears. And then the other thing, I was actually really bummed. So I think I mentioned this on the show. I think I actually mentioned it on the last one. I've been assembling / building an SCX10 Pro for Javier of Operation 11 Charlie. And basically, he was getting all the parts that he needed from the various supporters and vendors that, help him and his cause out. And so we had like Rock Pirates. They sent a Kraken chassis that was, I think, 1 of 1, custom anodized, the gold, just like they did for the short run of the Interceptor chassis. And then a bunch of parts. He sent me some wheels, tires, basically everything. I supplied the servos. That was my contribution. And I just assembled the whole thing for him, got it all set up, got the radio all dialed in, everything. And I was like looking forward, like that was like my number one like highlight, like that I was looking forward to. And I get there, and the first thing I do is get registered, park, get the rigs all out, everything. And then I go, all right, Operation 11 Charlie's in the same spot as last year. So let's go, meet up with Javier and give him his rig. So I walk over there, and I see Jared, and I'm like, hey, where's Javier? And he's like, oh, he's not feeling too well. And I'm like, oh, you got to be kidding me. I said, that's not good. And he goes, yeah. And I'm like, is it like sick? Or, and they're like, oh, they're not sure. They think it might be allergies or altitude sickness. And I said, really? And they're like, yeah. So they're like, he's taking some stuff right now, and he's trying to just relax. He'll probably be out in a little bit. So I was like, all right. And then I think like a couple hours went by, and then I walked by the booth and I saw him. So I was like, how are you doing? He goes, oh, I don't know what I have. I don't want to get you sick. And I was like, man, I said, this sucks. I said, well, let me go get your rig. I'm going to go, bring it over to you so you can check it all out and everything. And yeah, so I presented him the rig, and he was super stoked. He couldn't believe it. He was like, man, he goes, this thing turned out so good. And I said, all I really did was just assemble it and just kind of built it as how I kind of built mine. So, and yeah, so he buttoned up the sliders there, because the Rock Pirate sliders that they sent were actually a little too wide. So they switched them out there at the show. And then Saturday, he was feeling better. So we went and hit the trail, that center trail, for like, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes. And yeah, so we were both like, he was getting the feel for it and, taking it out. And that's where I got like a handful of my shots of, our rigs together. But that was a cool honor. And I was like super appreciative to be able to do that for him.
That's awesome.
Nice. That's rad.
But yeah. And then, yeah, that's really about it. I mean, Axialfest, we did have a little like Saturday at one point, we did think it was going to rain. The clouds rolled in and it was really dark for a while. And I was like, watch, we're going to get one of those Sierra Nevada thunderstorms. And we actually did start hearing some of the thunder, but we never got any of the rain.
Huh.
So
That would have been nice for keeping the dust down.
yeah, it would have been nice, but yeah. And then I guess I'll kind of roll into this now. So there is an event that Rob's Resort is working on to kind of start possibly annually at their facility. They're doing more, I guess you can say, what's the word? Like they're bringing in more concrete, they're bringing in more rocks. They're kind of going to tailor more to some of the crawling aspect of the hobby. So it's looking promising. So that's in the works. Elio's been talking to the owners like almost daily on ideas, name ideas, ideas of what to do at the event. And I think it's going to be a pretty exciting because here in, Northern California, we really don't have a ton of events anymore. We have Axialfest. We used to have Crawl for a Cure. Crawl for a Cure ended 2 years ago, and then we had the ASD Crawl, which just ended last year. So it's really just Axialfest that's like the big event in Northern California. So now that we're getting another one, which they're aiming for like a multi-day, event, it should be pretty exciting. So stay tuned for some more information as all of it unfolds.
Nice.
Killer.
That'll be
Yeah.
cool. Definitely. Right on.
So yeah.
What did you drive there mostly?
So I did drive the Pro. So I brought 4 cars with me. I brought the Pro, the Capra with the hard body on it, the 6 just in case I wanted to cruise around, and then the Blazer, the yellow Blazer, just in case I wanted that really scale rig. I ended up driving the Capra the most just because it's just a fun. I mean, since it has the hard body on it, it just brings out like that. It's like just scale enough that you're like, okay, it's kind of cool. It looks a little more scale. It doesn't look like a Capra, but it's more capable than your full blown scaler. So you can have a little more fun with it. So that's kind of been like my go-to rig lately. And then the Pro. I think I drove the Pro almost all day Saturday. So
Nice.
which I'm happy because if anybody remembers from last year, I screwed up when I was setting up my settings on the ESC. And for some reason, I thought I was in drag brake adjusting that, but I was in brake. And so it had no drag brake. So that thing used to roll all over, which is why I rolled off the one tree and fell like 15 feet on its lid. Which it did take a header this year to it. I guess you can call it the suspension bridge. They had fire hoses that they used as a bridge that they went from like log to log to log, and then there's all these like rocks underneath it because basically you went over that, then did like a U-turn and came back and went right underneath. And the one downfall, if you have a Pro, you know this. So you have the overdrive, and then you have the slight overdrive. So like you have the two variable overdrive. And what that forces is the rear end tends to walk slightly. And when you're going over like the bridges like that, you're constantly fighting, trying to keep it straight. And then you got that kind of swaying back and forth. Yeah. So what happened was I was watching it, the ass end kind of like worked its way over to the passenger side, and I was trying to correct it. And then that kind of fell. And I thought, okay, maybe it'll just fall and I can like kind of like, turn into it and like drive it back up and get it back on there. No, it just kind of like swung underneath and just undid, like kind of like did like a cartwheel and just went straight down to the rocks.
Oh God.
So that poor car's taking that poor car is taking a beating, or at least the body has. Because actually,
Which is the one Spencer painted, right?
no, the one Spencer painted is my 10-3. This is the Pro. So right here along this crease, this thing is hard. So many just like it just out, and you gotta like kind of like push on it. But yeah, no, this is the Pro. It's taken a header a handful of times, but everything's still going. Actually, I think this ding in the front metal tube of the front axle is probably the rock that it landed on, but still going strong. But I'm gonna leave that there because there's
good
one
tires on that.
there. Oh, I love those tires. Yeah, there's one part I want to talk about on this when we get to that portion. Yeah, no, these tires work really well. And I don't want to sound like a hater, but there's one other part of Axialfest that I just thought was hilarious, and it really just blows my mind. Like, you know, the level of like, I guess it's like the sheep mentality of like they just buy, thinking like they're building like the best crawler ever. But you still got to remember, you still got to know how to drive the car. You can't just put all these parts on it and expect that the car is going to do all this stuff on its own. There was a handful of people with like full tricked out Rock Pirates RC, like, you know, they cut the body up so there's not much, you know, body on it. They got crazy, you know, angles and everything on like the way they cut the body. And we were behind these two guys, and I was just laughing because they couldn't make it up like anything. And I'm sitting here going, you guys, like, that's not even the line. If you would have moved your tire over 2 inches, that'd be the perfect line. You go right up. You're sitting there like just trying to like, I don't even know what you're trying to do. You're just like going at it, like not even looking for a line. It just cracked me up.
Those are the guys giving advice on what tires to buy on Facebook.
And that's the other thing too. Both of them,
those people.
Yeah, both of them were running the pin tires, the actual like comp style tires.
Jesus.
And I'm like, you guys, like, it just kind of cracked me up.
The Facebook group build.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we got.
Totally.
Yep. So I'm just like, yeah. So it was funny because then after like I went around because they're like, oh, sorry. And I was like, oh, it's okay. And I went around and I went up the line and the thing just crawled right up over it. And they were like, is that a stock? You know, it's funny they say, is that a stock SCX 10 Pro? Because it's like there really isn't a stock one because you don't buy it. You don't buy it ready to run. You buy it as a kit and you got to put all your stuff in. And I said, well, yeah, it's just a Pro. I said, it's, you know, and they're like, oh, what, you know, like, what motor are you running? And I was like, you know, I'm like, oh, it's got a Puller Pro, and the Copperhead ESC. And they're like, wow, that thing like has like a really low, like, you know, grunt. And I was like, well, I have a crazy throttle curve thrown in it. So that way, like, you have to like, it's almost like 60% of the throttle before it really starts like going. So it's like you could barely pull it and it'll just, yeah. So I said that this thing, it's all about tuning. I mean, and I don't know, it's just funny just like to see, like, you almost like blow people's minds when you're like, yeah, there's nothing really fancy, you know, done to this, but it works. And that was the whole point, was I was trying to build something that was fun that you could just go take out, enjoy, and not really worry about.
I can't get into the whole comp cut body thing and all that. It's just goofy.
I don't even know if is that what you call it, a comp cut? I mean,
that's what they've been calling it, is comp
there's
cut.
a guy, because there's a guy on Instagram who's got this Unimog body that is all completely butchered up, and there's not really much of it left. It's literally like the windshield, like just the front of the hood. There's no front fender well, and then like the side of the body's cut up like at an angle all the way to the back window. And I'm like, you took a body that's like almost impossible to find now, and you just mutilated it, and there's like nothing left of it, and you're calling it a Unimog? Like, are you crazy? So
it's LCG, bro. Super LCG.
Some of that stuff I can't get over. I mean, like the LCG, it helps you to an extent, but then there's a point where it hurts you also. You know, because when they drop the center so low, you're now getting high centered on everything. So it's like, you got to have the happy medium. It's like, you can't go too much one way. You can't go too much the other way. It's like, you got to just find what works. And I think that's just the problem, is like, I think too many people see that other people are making chassis. So they're like, hey, I'm going to make a chassis and it's going to be different. Like, I do got to give credit. That's one thing I do like, excuse me, about Rock Pirates is they're not advertising as an LCG chassis. It still keeps your electronics in your belly at the same height. What they're doing is they're adjusting the shocks so you have more tunability of where to put the shocks, which is essentially just raising and lowering your ride height. So you can actually kind of go down, like get the ride height a little bit lower.
How our kit was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, which I think is a much better idea than all these people that are like, oh yeah, it's LCG, and then they like drop the chassis, they drop the skid all the way down. It's like in line with the pumpkin, and you're like, yeah, but now you can't get over anything.
It's not. Yeah, it's just not where the unlock is. The unlock is changing the leverage from end to end over that center of gravity, and that was, I think, the thing that got lost on a lot of people because it just LCG became this big buzzword. And it's like, well, like it does. It's not a must-have that's lowered. Like you really are not going to feel much tangible benefit from your driving if you're not going to think about it any differently. Like if you just go out there and just try and railroad everything, it's like, well, you're going to be shocked at the lack of results, obviously.
Exactly. So I don't know.
It's like people that have seen my EPX truck. They, what chassis is that? Like, stock chassis, dude.
Stock. Just change articulation. Yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, so overall, good times. So a lot of mingling, hanging out, just like, that's like the other thing. Like, I guess I'm not like your typical Axialfest attendee where you're like, yeah, I want to go and I want to hit every trail and I want to do this and I want to do that. I'm like, all right, I'll hit the trails, but I also want to see my RC family. Like I want to go, say what's up to, to this person, to that person, because this is like the one time, the whole year you get to go see them. So it's like, yeah.
Travis and I were just the opposite. We didn't really know anybody, and we're just like, we want to do every single trail here.
Well, to be fair,
we had the way when Jared went with me too.
Well, it was also hard because it was limited time because we had the booth to run too. So it was just like whatever minute we didn't have running the booth, because that was honestly like that was our time to talk to people, right? So like, that's where we got that feel of it, where it's like meeting people, et cetera, and then it's like, all right, well, when that's all done, let's go drive.
Yeah.
Go out and drive trails until 2 a.m.
Exactly.
Yep. Come back and do it all over again.
Oh yeah.
It was fun though. I mean, we got to check out a lot of cool stuff that way. We did almost everything. I think there's only 2, maybe 3 trails we didn't do that year.
Yeah, but that was also back when those trails took you like
forever,
hours to complete. Yeah. Now it's like, I mean, because I'm not kidding. When we went out Friday, I think we started on Trail A, and in an hour and a half, 2 hours, we made it all the way to D or E. And that just kind of shows you there's just not a lot going on. There's just not a lot going on those trails, so you can't so you just kind of like fly right through them.
Is there any creeks or anything there?
So there's like a creek that goes around like the perimeter of like the meadow. But there's no water in it. So depending on how late the water, stays, like last year, it was still muddy because there was no water, but the ground was still super saturated. Yeah, but no, there's no like active creek that actually like goes through there that I know of. Yeah, there's like also another little like creek bed thing in the center of the meadow. That I know last year, that's where Elio did their trail. He actually turned on one of the hose spigots and kind of like got water to flow through it, but then it kind of just pooled in certain areas and just stayed there. So it was kind of like just a quick little water crossing. But yeah, and not like
that's better than nothing though. I mean, that's still cool.
Oh yeah, it's not like that river, on the side of 80.
Yeah,
back at Cisco.
God, with all that slick rock down there and everything.
Oh yeah,
that place is so magical.
So sick,
man. I'm gonna forever miss that. That was so rad. That was one of the first places we hit, was down by the river when we first got there. We went with Ty.
It was Trail D.
It was rad.
That was a mind blowing experience.
Yeah, that was a hell of a way to like break yourself in for the first time at Axialfest. That was
Yeah,
some
definitely.
good driving there.
Oh yeah.
That was fun. We had a good time.
Yep. And like, because I know Randall's addressed it a handful of times on Axialfest or Bust. Because a lot of people, they're diehard. They always say, bring it back to Cisco, bring it back to Cisco. And I think what people just don't understand is it's just Cisco's gone. It's like, regardless of what happens, there's just, there's no, whoever owns it now, it's just like, it's impossible to get a hold of anyone. The store burned down. They got transients that live up there. It's just like, it's
If it was that
unfortunately, it's
simple,
gone.
it would probably still be there.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah,
Like,
So,
exactly.
but Rob's, like I said, they're doing big things. And I think there's a reason why they're now also becoming like the central hub for more than just, these RC events. I mean, a lot of people don't realize, which is also coming up in a month from now, September 7th, I believe, is Cantina for the Con. And that used to actually take place at Loon Lake Spillway, and that's where they always would like truck everybody in, and they'd have all their vendors, and they'd have the taco truck there and all that stuff. Well, now they host it at Rob's, so it's there. That's where they set up all the vendors. That's where they set up, the taco truck and all that stuff. And now you're actually not like having to like walk through the rocks just to like enjoy. You can go there, do all your things, then just go down the road and hit the Rubicon. So, but they're also bringing in more, they're trying to bring in more than just, the one-to-ones. So last year it was kind of like a last minute thing. Elio went up there and kind of represented Axial and or Horizon Hobbies and kind of like try to put on a little demonstration. This year, Axial got behind it so much that they're sending him rigs to use as demos. He's going to have his little booth set up there. The Scale Challenge West booth will be up there. And I believe he's going to try and set up in that same little scale trail that he built for Axialfest. And then, just let people, run the demos, which are all going to be base camps. So it'll be pretty cool. So if
that's a good idea.
If you're into one-to-one and RC and you're free that weekend, make sure you head up to Rob's Resort for that.
Sick.
Yeah, that'd be way cool.
So yeah, what else have you guys been up to?
Well, what should we get into next? I don't know if it cut out when I said that or not.
No, I heard you. You said, what should we get into next?
Do we want to get into? Oh, okay. No, did you hear me say new products?
New products?
Oh, no, I didn't know.
Is that like is that a segue for me to talk about these things again?
Can?
So I don't know. I got to see where the camera is. Like, I don't know if you'll be able to see that in the, because I'm like mirrored, so I'm like thrown off. So this way. So I don't know if you can see inside here, but these are a double cardan axle shaft from Upgrade RC. And it's a new product that they've been working on that actually I think just got released Monday. I think Monday was the official release, and it corrects the one downfall with the Pro. So the Pro's got such crazy steering left to right that the standard, which I think I still have here. So the standard, this is the long side. The standard one is just like your typical CV, but when it turns, it starts to bind because it's just a standard CV joint. So when when you're turning left to right, and let's say you have to go up something, you get this like chatter, and it kind of like chatters when it makes it, and then once it's into its next position, it's fine. So these actually eliminate that chatter because having the double cardan, it just continue like that whole motion left to right, no matter what speed you're at, the tires never chatter, so it won't do that hop. So like if you're actually comping with it, it's not going to cost you to like, you know, screw up your line or bounce off something. And yeah, so I've been running them. Oh, when did they sent those to me in March to test out. So I've taken them out a handful of times at a local spot. I've done a couple torture tests with them to try to see if I could bust the because it's I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it. It's there's like this like metal these rings that kind of hold in the pin that hold the assembly of the cardan joint together, and I've tried to like wad up, try, you know, them up. I haven't had them fail on me at all, so which is a plus. So they're strong. They fix the range of steering. I believe, who posted the video? There's a video from, I forget who the guy was. I'll probably have to look back through the text with Matt, but he posted his video, and he actually changed his endpoints, so he was turning and his tires were hitting the lower links in the front, and no problem. So
Nice.
yeah. So
Right.
it's a nice product. And then I guess, you know, if you've been following along, Upgrade RC, they've been around for a while. They were kind of more into like graphics and all that stuff, probably back in the later side of the early 2000s. They're now acquired by A-Main, so they have some hard parts that are coming out, and these are the first ones that they've released.
Nice.
So
Yeah, those are a good idea.
Yeah, I was just looking at those.
Which actually, let's pull that up on.
Oh, you're gonna pull it up on
A-Main.
stream?
Yeah.
Will the connection
here we
tolerate
go.
it?
Maybe.
yeah, it was Matt Wallace, his post. He basically had the car upside down, and he was just cycling back and forth till basically the tires are bouncing off the lower links, and thing doesn't skip a beat.
I don't fully. Yeah, Matt is.
I think he used to work for Proline.
He was. He left Proline. I don't remember quite. I think it was. I can't remember if it was before or after the Horizon buy of them, but yeah, he went to go work for them specifically for ProTech, which leads into what I was just about to say, which is I don't understand why these weren't released under ProTech, because when I was looking at the Upgrade brand on here, because I just wanted to see what they've released with all of this, it is still mostly like chassis protector skins and stuff like that. And then there's just like this weird departure, which they've been spending all this time on Upgrade anyways, which was like the whole reason they hired Matt, from what I understand. So like, I thought that was interesting too.
Yeah, I don't know too much
Yeah.
about you know, about how it came to be, because I was actually shocked as well, because when I was first presented with these and asked if I could test them out, I just assumed it was going to fall under ProTech. It wasn't really an exact reason why they're keeping it under upgrade. Regardless, it's going to be a house brand of A-Main, which I think is kind of like why you see the logos kind of like, in my opinion, kind of like similar to an A up there at the end of the G.
Yeah.
And I think it was because they were trying to keep like, because
It's an arrow.
Yeah. Because ProTech's got the servos, they got their battery line. So I think they were trying to keep like a certain like part of, ProTech just simply those parts, and then have some of these upgrade parts be under Upgrade RC, and to just try to keep them separate. But it's all still falls under the same house umbrella.
Interesting.
I mean, I'm sure I can get a better answer out of Matt.
I noticed
it makes
too with
sense. I see the logic.
one of their other house brands, EcoPower.
Yep.
They with one of their other house brands, EcoPower, I noticed they released like some nice like aluminum case servos and stuff under EcoPower instead of ProTech, which was strange. I didn't understand why. Why they wouldn't be under the ProTech label. So I don't know, it'd be interesting to know the reasoning behind some of that.
So my understanding behind that is exactly like what's in the brand's name. So EcoPower was supposed to be like the budget friendly version of their products, kind of like, Vanquish came out with Incision, so that way you had like an entry level versus their like, professional level. And that's what EcoPower started as, because the batteries they're still good, they're still a great battery, but they're more forgiving. They're for your like they're for your everyday person. They're not because they're not like as, I guess, care, I'm trying to think of the best way. Like, you don't have to put as much care into how you're treating the batteries, because Matt was telling me that he goes, if you're somebody who doesn't discharge your batteries, doesn't really run them the right way, like as far as like, you charge them up, you run it for like 20-30 minutes, and then you just throw it back in your box. He goes, you're going to be spending a lot of money on ProTech batteries that aren't going to last that long. Like, they'll be fine for a while, but you're going to start seeing, a drop off, because those batteries are such a high quality material that you need to follow all their instructions on how to store them. Whereas you said EcoPower is a lesser, I guess you could say, quality material that makes up the battery, and they don't require as much maintenance or care. So it's like, if you're somebody who's like, oh yeah, just throw it in the car, charge it up, run it, and then throw it, back in the box, you're better off, and they're cheaper. So that was my understanding. So everything kind of has a reason to where it falls, but I know for a fact that was the thought behind EcoPower and ProTech. So
let's see, what else did we get? Associated dropped a drift car. I don't know if we covered that before or not, but
I don't know, but I want to see something, because
for scale nerds.
See, I can never keep track of what's actually been released and not released yet.
What I need to do next time is just make a list of all the things that have come out or different stuff that we want to highlight.
Okay, it did come out.
Are you standing up again, Trav?
So it did come out. So one of the other things that EcoPower just came out with, and this is where you got to, like, if you do have sponsors, you need to know when to step up and say certain things. But I still will give them a shout out for this, because I do think it's cool. And MKS doesn't offer it, but they did come out with a direct fit servo for the SCX24. It's waterproof.
Oh, I
and
saw that. That's cool.
and it's got the mount, so and the link mounts. So the problem with the SCX24 platform is if you want to upgrade the servo, like let's say you wanted to get the because what was the servo that they always recommended? If you wanted to get like the Eco Power, I think it's like the 827. I'm looking at the website right now, or the 640T. I forget which one it is, but you wanted to get one of those servos and you wanted to put it in the SCX10 or SCX24. The problem was you'd have to get a new servo mount for the see, I'm looking at right here. You can get the servo mount in brass, the EcoPower 827 servo mount, and what that does is it gives you a little more room for the ears of the servo, and it gives you the links. The link mount is relocated for the upper links. With that new servo, the EcoPower.
Can you put it up?
Yeah. You want me to? Here, I'll show you.
Yeah, might as well.
Okay. So this is the servo I'm talking about. So it's the EcoPower WP173 X24. So if you look at it from the bottom, this portion right here drops right into the axle at the location where the actual servo mount, the stock servo mount is. And then these two tabs back here are your upper link mounts. So now it's all in one. So for $54, you're getting the servo, which is an upgrade, and the mount instead of let's go back here. So if you're going to get the 827, this guy, you're paying $15. This one I still believe is a plastic case. No, it's a plastic case servo. And you're going to have to get something like this and mount it all on there. So, I mean, you still do the price separately. Yeah, you're not quite getting to the 54, but I do believe this is a much better quality servo than this guy. So if you are going to upgrade your 124th, and it also looks like they came out with it in a plastic too. So look, for $20, you can even, here, I'll click on this one. I didn't even notice they came out with this one because he was telling me about the metal one. It's still an upgraded servo. Not sure on the specs. I'd have to look it up, but it's a direct drop in. Same thing. Drops right into the stock location, has the link mounts, and I mean, here's a whole video on it, but and this is where I'm horrible. So it's a 48.6 ounce at 6 volts. I'd have to see what the stock servo is. I think it's less than that. I want to say the stock servo is somewhere around like 28 to 30 ounces of torque. So even this, like I said, is an upgrade. But I mean, come on, for $20, and you don't have to get the plate. I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That one servo that it showed that was $105, that's the one that I didn't understand why it was under this brand versus being under ProTech, because that's like high-end servo price territory.
Oh, the EcoPower WP86, because that's a one. Oh, yeah, because it's a 1/5 scale servo. So that's your.
The one for $105.
Yeah. Here.
Oh, so it's a budget servo for big cars.
I'm gonna go back to this just so you can.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. So right here, see, 1/5 scale. They recommend it for ARMA, the Axial HPI, Low C, and others. Let's see, it's 1/5.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah.
6 volt to 8.4.
I just
667 ounces at 6 volts and an 861 ounce at. I mean, it's a decent size. It's a decent servo for a 5th scale, but I still think that there's stronger ones out there. But I mean, for $105, that's not bad at all for a 5th scale servo.
Yeah,
it's also waterproof. So.
Yeah, not for a 5th scale. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, because I'm sure if they came out with a ProTech servo like that, I'm just gonna look up, see what if anything pops up. It would probably be like,
Probably close to $200, I would imagine.
yeah, like twice that amount. Yeah, I'm just looking through real quick. I don't even see one advertised for a 6 scale. They got 12th and 10th, and that's it.
Interesting.
Yeah, at least nothing's like jumping out saying that it's real. That one, it said, yeah.
That was weird.
What are you getting messages?
No, it was some weird update for OneDrive that popped up that usually only pops up at. God damn it, this connection's terrible.
It's okay. You're fine.
There, now we got everybody back. What a nightmare. It is so bad tonight. It's like worse than the last episode.
Are you having like a solar flare over there?
No, I don't know. Are you guys not seeing it where everybody's screen goes black and it just does a spinning
No,
wheel?
it's just you.
That's just you.
Rad.
So was there what else was new that recently came out?
I don't know if it cut out when I said it before, but we had up their drift car, so there'll be all kinds of scale builds on that platform now. The DC-10.
Yep.
Aside from that, I can't really think of anything else that's new.
All right.
Well, should we get into questions and stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Did you guys hear me at all or no?
I said we both agreed and said yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I couldn't hear anything. Awesome. So we were going to talk about what it's like to have a small business in the RC industry and all the excitement and wealth that brings.
Excitement and wealth. That's yeah. You didn't wear your mink hoodie with you. And your
No,
gold
I
chain.
didn't. I do have my chinchilla flip flops on though.
Yeah.
So the first question was from Chris Trudeau on Instagram, and it was, with overseas ability to copy and mass produce parts, sometimes similar quality but for less, do you think it discourages certain companies from taking off? It's been shown that algorithms track products of individuals who might sell on Etsy or Amazon and then quickly get copied or pushed further down the list in favor of preferred copies.
Travis, you want to answer first, or?
Yeah, I guess, yeah. I mean, if it's discourages as never gets started, hard to say. Does it impact the ability to survive? Yes, but not as much as you would think. Like, I mean, it can. It definitely can. And obviously enforceability has always been a huge issue with that, right? but also the other side of it too is that, like, look, if you're an RC business that can't get a lot of legal protection on what you're making, well, then that's just exacerbated by, like, well, if you go and you get that made from China, well, they're just going to sell your stuff white label too, right? But that's also like you're really contingent on like how many of those go to then sell on Amazon. I think is really the big thing. There's not a ton of people that are doing a whole lot of like AliExpress or Alibaba scalping for white label versions of what you're making. There's just, I mean, people are just honestly not that resourceful. And so what you would hear, right, is like the example that always came to mind for me was Vanquish, right? Where like people very openly were just like, oh yeah, I bought Vanquish wheels for this, right? And I bought those off Amazon. And that to me is maybe the most prevalent example of it, where it's just like we're taking something like basically people, it's more the case that people will seek out a cheaper knockoff version of something they like because they do not want to pay the price of it, despite the rhetoric you hear. And that's the core issue and how it relates to RC, right? Because again, the enforceability with China is already bad enough, but like at the scale that RC is, which is very small, like globally, right? Like there's just nothing you can do about that, unfortunately, with the exception of trying to get Amazon to, delist. But Amazon is also really bad about that. And a lot of much larger conventional market brands struggle with this exact same thing, despite having all of the, IP paperwork and the money to enforce that IP. And it's still a huge issue, right? So in some ways that's not as big of an issue as RC, but like it's more that people seek it out with enough intent because they just want to pay a lower price, and they have no problem telling people that. And it's the only community I've seen this be the case in too. I don't know, like granted limited exposure, but I've not seen this in other hobbies communities the way that I've seen it here. So I think that for me, if I was making that decision, my main concern was just if I was going to have anything manufactured in China, was I willing to take the risk to have them white label it and sell it? Right? Like that's the qualifying question, and it's completely dependent on what it is you're making.
So I really have no like experience with this other than the fact of like some of the stuff that you've touched on. I know for the longest time, Vanquish tried really hard to keep their stuff from getting into overseas hands where they could copy it and make knockoffs of it. I mean, and they actually did for a really long time keep it out of the copycat hands for the first at least 5-6 years they were in business. There were no copycats. And then of course the wheels started getting leaked. Next thing you know, you got the axles, and then pretty soon, they pretty much try to photocopy everything that they've done and sell it. Now I think there's two folds to that. I guess you could say the consumer or customer. You're going to get the ones that are like, yeah, I want that style, wheel or whatever, but I can't afford to do the full brand one. So I'm going to get the cheaper one. But you're still going to have those people. I feel that the clientele and the customer base that's going to say, no, I want the real deal. Now, where it gets, harder, similar to like listening to your answer, is if you are somebody who's not gonna, you're not gonna produce the stuff yourself. You're not gonna, be making it in-house here, in the States, and you already know that you have to go overseas. Well, then, it's just part of the deal that you're most likely at some point going to be copied. It's whether or not, do you already have the brand, or do you have the endurance to just stay with like promoting your product so they'll buy yours instead of going somewhere else? Because I think if you already are getting everything, manufactured over in China, you're probably gonna have a lower price point anyways. So I just don't know how much cheaper, like if you're keeping yours pretty like what the fair amount is, like for it being, produced overseas, I don't know, even being white labeled, how much they can actually knock off. So you're still going to be at the same price point as whether or not it's got your logo or another
Yeah.
logo on it. So at that point, it's more of just pimping your product out there and getting it out there into your consumers' hands and making sure they buy yours instead of the other. Because I mean, I see it all the time, especially when you buy stuff for like the SCX 24 market. You go on Amazon and you look up like brass diff covers. There's like 6-7 different companies, but they all look the same. The names changed.
But
And
yeah, exactly.
And I see that a lot with stuff like that, where people, it's not like a 1/10 scale. They're not going to want to pay top dollar for a brand that they can just find on Amazon because, it's already a $100 car.
Yeah. And that's a really good point that you bring up too. Like, unless you're doing nothing to push what you're making, you are not losing 100% of your capturable sales to knockoffs. Like, that's just not happening, right? So like, it's a percentage, sure, but it's a smaller percentage that you would hope to not notice. But also too, there's something to be said about defensibility, and this is not talked about enough, right? Where it's like, okay, well, what is it that you're making? Like, diff covers, like, I'm sorry, they're all exactly the same. Even the people who design them themselves, make them here, whatever, I don't care. It's like, dude, they're diff covers. There's nothing revolutionary about it. So you are going to find copies of this. You are going to find generic versions of this, things like that. Transparently, like, even just something as simple as this, the pivot balls that we make, like, I have those done in China because where else am I going to get them done? Good luck finding an American manufacturer who's going to take that on. And that's just specific enough of a thing, despite being, for platform or whatever, where it's like, it's not worth their time to hustle those because they're spending all their time hustling all the generic other brass diff covers that they offer.
Yeah.
Right. Like, that's the thing too, where it's like, okay, but if you are also going to make the same thing as everybody else in the same way, you open yourself up to that risk. And so there's a very fine line between, like, what is just asking to be knocked off, and then what is, like, what is something that's like, they would just rather have the wholesale business. What a lot of people forget is with a lot of these manufacturers too, because it's not like, in certain regards, it's actually a somewhat small minority, because a lot of them do depend on the manufacturing business. But also, especially in RC, a lot of the RC specific manufacturers hustle some stuff direct because everything else is too volatile, and they work with sellers that are too small time to provide them like income they can count on. And so that's why they offer some of this stuff. And yeah, sometimes they stretch it a little bit where it's just like, hey, let's just find something and completely rip it off. But that's not all of them, too. So it's like, there's something to be said about having trust in the manufacturer. But that's a big thing where it's like, well, what are you making? That's a qualifying question end to end. If you can't do it in America, right, for whatever reason, which there are several, that why you wouldn't, but it's like, if you're not going to do it, then it's like, all right, well then, like, just go through a very brief checklist of like, how easy is this to replicate? Everyone likes to think that they have some major big idea that their new thing is the major like new release, where it's like, hey, my brass diff cover, my brass diff cover is awesome. And it's like, all right, like, yeah, but 15 others are going to be released tomorrow that are just as awesome, but you believe it differently. It's like that's not enough.
Yeah. And I think it does. It comes down to those parts. It's whether or not you're coming out with something that's going to be, okay, so we're talking about diff covers, like the diff covers, the portal box covers, the wheel weights, the knuckles. I mean, there's only so much you can do with it.
Exactly.
And it's going to come down to exactly what you said. Do you want to, come up with something new? Like that's one actually, and I'm like almost scared to say it because I don't want to give anyone ideas, but like when Vanquish came out with their scale knuckles and stuff, where it actually has like the scale looking welds on it and all that stuff. I'm actually surprised there isn't a Chinese knockoff of that.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's because they don't want to spend the time figuring out the tooling or like of the file, whatever
That's
it is.
exactly what it is.
Probably. Yeah. Because they
Because
never, even so, like at global scale mass market, like they would never recuperate the cost.
because I think for them it's easier to just take the generic plastic part and just copy it into aluminum and then sell it off as an aluminum product.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because they're not looking for like hero products. Like
No.
that's the whole other thing too. Is like they're not looking for hero products. They're just looking for things that add to the breadth of the revenue. Like it's stability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, because I mean, it's always funny. You can go on Amazon, you can find full on, or even eBay, you can find full on axles that are, like they're like, oh, these are designed for the SCX10. They're designed for, the Enduro. It's like, or the Traxxas, and all it is the exact. They look identical to the plastic ones that come on your car, but they're all aluminum.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah. I don't know, Dad, if you have any thoughts on that, but
Not really. Not anything that you guys haven't already said.
okay. Yeah, I think it's just what you're making is the big thing. Like,
Yeah.
a lot of and two, just picking your vendors. Like, if you are going to go down this path, like, picking your vendors is really important. Like, feel them out, and again, like, some of them have completely different missions. The ones that I've worked with have been historically great, right? Like, it's just, but at the same time too, I'm not in the same level of position of risk where it's like, if they would duplicate everything we make tomorrow. It's just like not the case. And also too, the same thing, Vanquish, it's like all the parts I would be concerned about like are manufactured here. So it's like they would like, that's more work than they're going to do, plainly. Yeah.
And then Chris's other question ties into that pretty nicely, actually. I had it pulled up here and it disappeared on me. So Chris said, this was on Facebook, I feel like for some companies it's twofold. Some of the folks I encounter who on the one hand are shouting buy American are also the ones that when you direct them to companies like Reefs, Vanquish, Beef Tube, Spec RC, etc., will complain about how expensive they are and respond by, I'll just get it off of Amazon or Temu.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
people love to say buy American because that's the popular thing to say. It makes them feel good when they say it. It makes them look good on Facebook when they say it, but not many people actually practice it.
Unfortunately, in RC, it's a good boy points badge for sure. Yes.
I think
it's virtue signaling, basically.
It is, yes.
I mean, I think that's part of it, but I honestly do truly feel that some of it does stem from, because there are some people that actually say that I think it stems from the other industries that you're already in. Like for instance, it's like, it's like a known thing. Like when you're buying certain tools, like power tools, you buy the American brands or you buy the ones that are made, the companies that are made in the USA. And they're usually a higher quality product. They're going to last longer. They're not going to break. They're not chintzy. They won't pit. They won't, fall apart. And then, because like for the longest time, like that's why you could get Craftsman as, like the wrench sets, like, they're still made in the USA. I mean, I don't know if they still are, but like back when like I was acquiring all mine, it was a big deal to get the ones that were like, made in the USA because you knew that they were going to last. Now you get whatever and you could just tell they fall apart faster. They're just cheaply made. So I think some of them that scream like, buy American is you're still using that mentality that you're going to have a more superior product if you stay with the American versus getting something overseas. So
yeah,
it's like a catch-22 when I see that phrase. But at the same time, there's some stuff, and like I don't want to like totally go down that rabbit hole, but like some of the brands that he said they're not American. Like, yeah, the name's American, but their products aren't.
What did he list off again?
He listed Reefs and like Beef Tubes. And it's like Beef Tube stuff's made in China. Reefs is made in China.
Yeah, there's not. Yeah, you can't say buy American and then list off those. That'd be like saying buy American and he listed off Endura.
Right. Well, I think, yeah. Well, I think too, everyone says whatever until it's time to like make a decision on that price point.
And then
Right.
and that's the other thing too. There are people that, you know, that's part of their, you know, like you said, I guess you could say badge of honor / like bragging points. You can say, hey, I bought something that's supporting a fellow American, that's keeping his lights on, that's keeping, you know, his family fed, whatever.
Yeah.
Because, you know, there are a lot of, you know, companies that, you know, that are that way, and
Yeah,
still make
which
the
there's something
products.
to be said for that. I mean, Vanquish, for example, even though not all of their stuff is made in the US now, you know, like with their kits and RTRs and stuff, with some of that being made overseas, there's
But it just can't
the,
be.
I
Like,
think
that's a
there's,
key point, right? Like, they can't
yeah,
make it
yeah,
here. Like, that's just not an
right.
option.
But
People forget this a
at
lot too,
this,
where it's like kits, RTRs, motors, batteries, things like that, where it's like some final assemblies, whatever, like that QC can happen here. But it's like there are just some things that American manufacturing is just not well equipped to do as well as overseas is, plainly. Any
yeah,
battery, like Max Amps, for example, was a good example of this, like just from secondhand. Like, I never looked at one directly, but this was the feedback I would hear all the time, was like, disassemble the battery, and it's each one was so different, right, compared to like what you get overseas. And like, maybe we cut this, but like, that was a thing where it's just like, it's just not something that, like, unless someone's just super like heads down in their garage doing something like this, like back when it used to be like when people were winding brush motors and stuff like that, like, sorry, but like overseas can just make the superior product. They just can, like, they're just better at it than we are, right?
And not necessarily,
yeah,
I
and the
wouldn't say
quality is
necessarily.
there still.
Yes.
So my whole thing is, I wouldn't necessarily say that like they're more equipped and can make a more superior product. It's also, you got to look at a business side of it.
Oh, I can
So
for sure.
so like, if like like if you're looking at the plastic parts, like, you know, like in an RTR, like, you know, you're looking at like, okay, let's say like the cage, or like, you know, the skid plates or whatever. Like if you're looking at all that, it's a lot cheaper and more efficient as a business to just source that overseas than to try to
Sure.
find a plastic company over here that wants to do it, because then it's going to drive your price point up even higher. And now you're making, you know, like that was the one thing that I saw with like the Ripper. When the Ripper first came out, the very first car that Vanquish ever released, and it was all made in-house, but it was expensive. You had to put 500 down, if I'm not mistaken, 500 down as a deposit, and then you still owed like another like $400 or $500 once it was done, because they milled it out of a solid block of aluminum. So, you know, you're paying for not only the material but the process. And like, don't quote me, I might have the prices wrong, but it was something along those lines. And that's why they started selling those things for a stupid, ridiculous price. And that's why the consumers started trying to sell those on a stupid, ridiculous price, because they're like, hey, I paid like $1,200 for this thing,
Yeah.
and I want, you know, my money back for it. You know, fast forward to the rigs that they have out now, I think that's how they keep the competitive price point, and they can compete with your uh your enduros, and you can compete with your axials, and you can compete with Traxxas, is because you're now knowing like, hey, we're giving you our quality axles and the parts that, you know, that Vanquish has been known to make. But like your stuff, like, I mean, don't quote me, I don't know where their chassis rails are made, but like if they want to get their chassis rails, their plastic parts, their, you know, what I call the consumables, they can get those stamped, easily printed out overseas, bring them in, and now they're, you know, they're keeping the price point
Yeah.
down.
But one key point is that I would venture to say the Ripper, it was much more a labor of love, and they
Yeah.
never intended to, like, that was never going to be like, oh, like, this is
Yeah.
going to be our 10-3, right? Like, this is going to be just, we're going to make something super sick, all out. The price point is going to reflect that, and everything you have to, like, the
Yeah.
down payment, like you said, and everything else. But it's like, you consciously accept going into a project like that, you will sell quite a lot less of them, you know?
Yeah.
And so, and it's like, it's a fun swing to take, right? And I don't know if they would do it again, but it's like, I'm like, you know, so I'd be curious to see what the takeaways were from that. But in many cases, though, it's like, well, the big differentiator for me, for most people, is plastics and rubbers, right? So I can't, like, for example, I have a non RC related project for products where some of these things that are coming out later this year are silicone. And it was a big discussion point we had internally about this, of like, is there a way, like, it would be awesome to be like, at some point down the road, like an American based, like, you know, like, have the manufacturing here to do all this stuff and like really lead the charge on that transition. And we did some looking into this, and it was just, even if we could stomach the price point for the silicone manufacturing change, right? One, like, you know, the immediate deal breaker is it would drive a price to a point that nobody would pay for it. But even if we could find a logic around that, it was that we still are not going to get nearly as consistent of a product as we're going to get overseas. Like, it's just not that far built out yet. The hope is that we get there, right? But it's like, that's the thing too, where it's a lot of those decisions can, you know, like your hand gets forced a little bit, where it's like, yeah, you want to do American and stuff like that, but depending on what you're like making, like, is it feasible? And where you see most of these brands like us really meet in the middle is like, okay, well, can we do CNC parts here? Like, that's the one where it's like, okay, that makes sense, but you still need, if you're not making them yourself, which is optimal, like in your, you know, in whatever setup you have, then you better have a really good vendor relationship with someone here who honestly is giving you better pricing. Like, before we settled on who was making our stuff now, like, I did a ton of quoting around, and like everything I got back was laughable because they're just like, it's just not worth our time. You know, everyone is cool
nobody
with just
wants to
taking,
do it. That's the hardest.
nobody wants to do it because they've all got
That's like-
some like 25-year-old aerospace contract that they're just like, I'm good. Like, that's everybody that's doing this sort of thing, that's making stuff here. And so that's the hard part, right? Is like, well, your options are also pretty limited too, unless you're just going to be like, hey, I'm just going to CNC this shit in my garage, which a lot of people do. And like, more power to you. I wish I could do that. That'd be sick. Somewhat. But then it's like, all right, well, if you can't do that, what do you do? Well, then a lot of times you go overseas, right? And so
you just, for the most part, especially in the RST industry, you just have to go overseas, because American companies, like Trav said, they've got other clients that are a higher priority. They don't care about RC. They don't really care about what it is that you're making. They'll bid it so high just to basically brush you off. It's hard to find anyone that even wants to help you. Or like, let's say you do find somebody like the outfit that does our anodizing. We've had some terrible luck with those guys. And I saw, you remember Matt that worked at Kitty Tech? Yeah. So he's doing his own parts now, and he uses Dunham for their anodizing. And he was talking about how they're the best, and, you know, they've done such a fantastic job and stuff. And it was so funny to listen to like his commentary on his experience he's had with them versus the amount of shit they've done for ours. And it's like,
well, because they're great for the people who have face-to-face conversations and they have to eat shit in front of them. For people like me, who they just like won't even return an email despite spending however much I've spent with them, it's like, it's different. And that's the hard part too. Like, for example, take a I thought about this a lot. Like, take a random brand I'm thinking of, like for racing, like if TLR, Team Losi, let's say for a moment they decided, okay, well, all of our all of our CNC parts and all that stuff that like anything that's not injection molded, like we could get all of that done in the States for a reasonably comparable price point. It still wouldn't be worth it, because the amount of nonsense they would have to go through with the manufacturers for those items here in the States versus the people overseas who are actively fighting for their business at every single moment is just not there. And that's the thing that I've really struggled with, is like, what I've not had anybody be able to replicate and tell me is like, and if anybody has an example of this, feel free. And it's not that I don't have a bad relationship with my machinist or anything like that, but like, it's just a blanket thing of like, I've never had to fight so hard to give people money. And that's the thing that always drives me insane. It's just like, there's not, and the thing is, like, for example, even when you can get them to do it, they won't listen. We changed anodizing vendors. I found one local to me up in Broomfield. It's about 45 minutes to go up there. Like, it's on my way to Boulder, and super nice guy, but and this is a side tangent that I'll get on in a second. Super nice guy. His name's Butch, but he's just some old guy that's running an anodizing shop, and he's just chilling out all the time. And so I bring him my parts there. The last run I did was the side risers, and I bring him parts there. All my stuff's supposed to be, bead blasted on top of the hard anodizing. That's what gives it the texture. I, put it on the PO. I talked to him beforehand. I get his pricing, all that stuff. He thinks it's going to be $50 an hour for 2 hours of bead blasting. I'm like, sick. So we do all that. I talk to him again about it when I'm there. I come back 4 weeks later, 2 weeks after he said it was supposed to be done. And they're not bead blasted. They're anodized black and everything else, but they're not bead blasted. The texture doesn't match. And I asked him about it, and he was just like, yeah, we just didn't do it. It's like, granted, he didn't charge me for them, but it's like, that's not the point, right? Like I was like, yeah, but like
that
I
is
would have
so
liked this
typical of
done.
American companies.
Yes, and that's my thing. Now, part of this is also exacerbated by, like I talked about, a lot of these guys are running off, tend to be older contracts and things like that, stuff that they can somewhat rely on to a certain extent. There's also this issue, though, where there's a lot of these things in these businesses that, even if they're like family businesses, these are not skills that are being passed on. And this is something that like the American economy is not realized yet, right? Is like, there's a lot of people that like their father was a machinist. They're a machinist. They run the machine shop their father ran. None of their kids know how to do it. None of their kids have any interest in learning how to do it. Same thing for anodizing is a fantastic example of this, where like there's kind of an artistic element to it. The kids want nothing to do with it. Dunham was an example of this. Dunham, the guy that built the business when his father passed, left it to his son. And from everything that I've read and talked to people about, the son could not be less interested in running that business. He just does it because he kind of has to, right? Like no one's going to buy it off him, and he can't really shut it down because it's how he makes his money. So it's like, then you're getting into that point where it's like, well, okay, when he's done, the business is done. Like that's not going to get passed on to anybody. These aren't skills that people are learning, not in the volume that people used to. And so that's a whole other issue too, where it's like, you are like, the people that you would go to this sort of thing are like retiree age. And that's going to start dropping off at some point. And then it's like, well, then what do you do? Like the little bit of American manufacturing that exists in those, which is actually quite a lot of the percentage makeup. Well, that's just going to go away. So those are the kinds of people you're dealing with then in RC, where it's like, hey, can I find the one or two of you that like this may be worth your time? But again, it's like, it has to be worth yours too, as the person going to them as the customer, of like, are they even going to do what I ask?
Yeah.
And it's, again, you can't be unreasonable with them, but it's just like as simple as we agreed on this. It's on paper. You didn't do it. And that is a conversation I have had more times than something going right probably as much. I think it's a 50-50 split, where it's just like, I don't know how I couldn't have been clear. And, across various vendors and, ones we don't use anymore, obviously, but it's just like, how hard is it to do exactly that? Where it's like, if I talk to someone on Alibaba right now for like, I just want to get something made, they'll do, as long as I'm here and I, give them technical specs and everything and tolerances you need to adhere to and stuff like that. Like they'll do it without complaint, and I'll get it quicker. Actually, that's the other thing too. American manufacturing is not faster. It is much slower most of the time. So it's just stuff like that, where it's like, it's really hard to find a winning combination in it. I think it's still the dream, but it's hard when it's like, if you're going to bootstrap your way through that as an RC business, that's very difficult, because again, in RC too, like your margins are already so much harder. And so then this is what, to bring us back to the original point, this is why the made in USA thing is like, it's like a frustrating touch point where, so I'll give you two examples. In RC, like I said, I think people are much more open about buying the cheaper version, knockoff, stuff like that. And that's like, that is a competitive concern depending on availability. If no one knocks it off, then it's fine. But then sometimes they just won't buy your stuff. And so that's an issue. And I fought in the early days. I was like, we have to do everything in, like, I thought we had to do this. Like, we have to do everything in America because like our base is going to resonate with that. People like that sort of thing. And like, that's going to make it like, that's going to make people want to buy from us, you know, on top of everything else. And it's like, well, that's not really as true. That wasn't as potent of a thing as I thought. So I just thought it was something people said. And
Yeah,
so
not even close. Yeah.
right. But now here's the contrast. The knife business I work on, right? Where there's a huge anti-China stigma in this, where like people thought that me 3D printing scales, like my early ads that I was running and stuff like that, people thought I was a Chinese seller asking like what part of China. And I'm like, I'm 3D printing stuff. Like, what are you talking about? A completely foreign idea to them. And so I was like, okay, I actually like really have to put on display like I am an American vendor. So I did that. And, you know, obviously feedback was much better. But one of the things that we're making that is on the slate right now is like, I was going to go to China for it because my takeaway from SOR was like, I'm just going to go where it makes the most sense to make, like just plainly. And in the conversations I've had with people about these ideas and stuff like that, and talking to different like my customer base with this, I've realized like, no, actually this means something completely different to these people. Like I need to find a way to do this in America. Now, granted, much less complicated part. It's not going to go through nearly the rigor that I've had to do with the other stuff for SOR as far as like design and, you know, manufacturing and stuff like that. Therefore, it'll be much cheaper. But then I was like, okay, like now I'm challenging what I thought I knew here, which was I'm going to actually have to like, it would be probably a huge like detractor if I didn't make this in China. And so it's a community dependent thing. And I found that to be really interesting. And I don't know what you do about that, but it's like, that's the unfortunate nature here is like, you know, and I'm not trying to like dog on RC or anything, but it's just like here, it is just not going to go as far. And that's something that I think is really worth considering too. Like, and again, like if you want to look at that, like, again, even if like people are totally cool with RC brands that are totally China based, that if they just have an American face for it, and that's totally fine. Like there's nothing wrong with that. I am not in the camp of like China evil stuff like that at all. But
Yeah, no.
you know, at least as far as the business, like people forget that people are not their government, et cetera, et cetera. But like, that's my thing is that like, that's enough to satisfy a lot of people. Like, you know, I know Reefs has been brought up before, like, again, nothing against them. I don't know any of those people, but it's like same thing. Like all of that stuff's made in China. It's, you know, like, I don't even know if they do the design work. Right. But it's like, it's basically just the name on that stuff. And then that's the thing, but there's a lot of people you can talk to about it. And it's like, that's the relationship builder. And it's just like, well, that's about as far as that ever gets you, you know, like, if you're going to try being the made in America servo company, Godspeed. Like you're not going to make it plainly. So it's like you take what's given to you a little bit too. Yeah. But I just thought that was an interesting
to circle back a little
point. Yeah, go ahead.
To circle back a little bit to American vendors. And some of the trouble that we've had just getting responses even, or like Travis said, having them do what we've asked them to do, or in a lot of cases, what we've paid them to do and they didn't do.
Yeah. Anodizing's been
the customer service from the Chinese vendors is, yeah, but the customer service from the Chinese vendors that we've dealt with is hands down 100% better than anything that we've encountered in America. They respond to you quickly. They are very quick to make things right. Like, for example, the Scalar C-Show patches that we had done, they did embroidered at first, and that's not what I asked for. And I flipped. I was just like, oh my God, you know, they screwed up. They didn't do what I asked. And now I'm going to have to fight with them to get them to do it the right way and get what it is that I wanted. And I completely overreacted in that situation because I didn't have the experience that Travis has dealing with some of those people. And they were so willing to make it right and make me happy. And this is on, you know, $175 order. Like it was literally nothing, but yet they're treating it like their paycheck depends on it. Like, please give us a chance to make it right. You know, and it's because there's so many other outfits that do the exact same thing over there that you can go any number of places and have the exact same thing done. So it's like they're hungry for your business, and we've been treated better by Chinese vendors than we ever have with American vendors, and it's just mind blowing. And I guarantee a lot of the RC people do not realize that it's just so many of the US vendors and stuff, they just don't even want to fuck around with it. They could care less.
Now, one point to make on this too is that the American vendors that are going to decide that you are worth the time are generally one person or two people operations. They're very busy, obviously.
Yeah.
Now, things do escape from that, right? You may get like a worse service level and things like that, but which is really frustrating on a B2B side. On a lot of cases, though, I would challenge that extra work is like worthwhile. Like, one of the things that I've really tried to do, honestly, with both, but like with just because it's in the knife stuff, it's my money, so it's different. But it's like, here's an example. Guy in Canada has his stuff shipped to a PO box in America, super common, and he ordered the wrong size of scales from me. And so I'm like, no, so it's like, all right, like just send him a replacement set, right? And like, I'll send you the right size. I'm not going to bother sending you a return label for it. I'm obviously already going to have to ship you the extra, and it's like a return label from a PO box, stuff like that. It's like, it's not worth it to me. And the thing is everyone always makes this customer service decision. Like the small business owner is like, oh, I don't want to spend the $4.47 on the shipping label to do that. Like, I can't afford that. And it's like, bullshit. You can. And it's like, this is like, I've just taken that like no questions asked approach, and I've probably doubled I've made back double in like the last 2 months of what I've spent on like replacement orders and shipping and stuff like that for any issue anybody's had, regardless if it's my fault or not, just from referrals, because people are like, you did not have to do that. That's awesome. Like, thank you, etc. And I'm granted, like, again, I've not found RC to be that gracious, but it is worth pointing that out too, where it's just like a lot of like people will like vendors here too will completely sacrifice customer service because they're just like, oh, well, I'm just too busy and stuff like that. Like, you're just gonna have to wait. And it's like, yeah, you got to protect your time, monetize it, all that sort of stuff. But also too, it's like, you are very quickly to be put on the back burner all the time, where it's just like, okay, but like at a certain point, like it just kind of feels like I'm a hassle to you. I'd rather you just tell me that, and that's the thing too, where it's like, yeah, it's super exhausting, like trying that hard for people all the time. And I am not a people pleaser. So it's like, it's a muscle I do not have, but it's been worth it. Right. And I understand that like, it's not a one-to-one, like, every business is different, but I just don't find anybody who ever wants to try that hard, plainly. And it is a bit of a commentary versus like the breadth of people that are like, knocking your door down overseas that are like, oh yeah, we'll do this. No problem. Yeah. I have a sample sent to you in 3 weeks. Sick. Okay. Not 2 months of nothing from somebody after they said that they were going to get it to you. And then it's like, oh, well, this going on and that going on and everything. It's like, cool, tell me. Like, why did we get to here? Right. And that has happened so much with so many different vendors, right? So it's just, and that's what's hard about it. It's a tricky thing. And again, like RC is like, pick your product wisely. Like, we were over aggressive on the parts, I think. Like, I'll be pretty transparent about that. But it's like, if you have like one idea that's like defensible and like you can make it for like a reasonable amount, and you think you can do that in America too, like, sick, do it. But these are just a lot of the things you're going to run into when it's like, you like, be ready for that fight out of the gate.
Yeah. It's funny when you were talking about gracious customers and stuff, when, and I think about like the RC guys and stuff, and how when you do something extra for somebody, it's so,
they just ask for more.
Few and far between that you get that reaction like what you do with your stuff. I was just gonna get ready to say that. It's when somebody's gracious, they take that as an invitation to ask you for more stuff. There was recently a guy, and I made a mistake with this. Like, I had a couple things sitting around. Like, I think I had sent him like some shock towers or just miscellaneous, just spare parts that I've had sitting around that he was looking for, nothing crazy. And, it's always been this big, this big talking point with him about, oh man, I want to support you guys and I want to do this and want to do that. But like the guy hadn't spent anything with us for I don't know how long. And then like there was another thing that I had floated him just to be nice again. And the dude actually asked for tracking on something I was sending him for free. He's like, hey, I haven't seen this yet. You know, can I get tracking for this? And I just was like, dude, I'm not going to give you something out of the goodness of my heart, pay for shipping and everything else, and give you a tracking number. Not only that, I'm not going to tolerate you asking me for a tracking number on something that I did for you as a favor or a gift. Like that is just crossing a line. And there's so many people like that are just so comfortable. I mean, this dude asked me for a IFS 2. It's like, hey, you have an IFS 2 sitting around there that I could have? I'm like, are you serious right now? Like, that's just something I've got just, oh yeah, no problem, dude. Here you go. You know, like,
and this isn't like that
RC
uncommon
guys,
of a thing at all. Like that's the
like RC guys think they think that if you are a business that you have disposable income that you can just give stuff away because you own the business, it must not cost you much to do this. And they have absolutely no clue how you just fight tooth and nail for every dollar. And anytime you tell somebody no, you're the bad guy, and it pisses them off, and then they take it to Facebook. And like that's the one thing that RC customers cannot handle is being told no. I recently had a customer of ours ask about wanting to go into business, and he was like, hey, I'm thinking about starting an RC business and stuff. And like, I really wanted to tell him, like, don't, like it's going to make you hate the hobby. But, I tried to prepare him the most honest way that I could. I was like, people are going to ask you for stuff for free. They're going to tell you they'll give you exposure. They're going to tell you that they want to support you. They're all full of shit. They're not going to do that. It's
one thing though,
saying
too,
whatever it takes to try and get stuff out of you. And
well, I was just gonna say real quick that like that's every business, right?
And on top,
but it's just like the volume is so much higher in RC, and that's my main point is like anything that you're gonna make stuff, sell it, whatever, and like you're especially like dependent on like the customer experience, things like that. Like this is gonna happen like where people just are always like trying to get something out of you for sure, and like promise you all this stuff, and then just doesn't materialize. But like it had happened so much here that I thought that it was this bad everywhere. Like I didn't realize how isolated it was, and that was the thing that like caught me by surprise. Where I was like, okay, like this is actually an interesting thing for us to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, people are gonna take things to Facebook that should have been an email or a phone call when it's a customer service issue or an order issue. I mean, that I had forgot a logo on a sticker sheet back when I was doing RC sponsor sticker sheets, and he didn't even bother to contact us. He immediately took it to Facebook complaining about how we forgot this and everything. And that's how I found out that his order was wrong. And he didn't think there was anything wrong with that. He thought that was totally like, oh, no big deal. It's like, dude, you didn't even give me a chance to make it right. You didn't even alert me that there was a problem. It was just an honest mistake. I'm not trying to screw you out of anything by forgetting a logo. All of that space was taken up by other logos anyways. So it's not like you paid for material that you didn't get, so you're going to have those situations where, and then there's people that are going to downplay the value of your product. There was a guy that didn't bother to read our notice on the website about how long orders take to process and manufacture, and takes it to Facebook, lied about emailing us, took it to Facebook, and was, how hard it would be to drop a sticker sheet in the mail. And it's like, man, when you reduce it down to that and make it sound like it's just, I'm doing absolutely nothing, and it's just this super easy job, it's like, yes, I'm going to react in an angry way towards you, So I pretty much fired the guy as a customer and was just like, okay, I'll give you your money back right now. I don't even want to deal with you, you know.
Yeah.
And it's just, you're going to deal with people like that, you know, just, and I think that's one thing with RC is you're dealing with a group of people that don't really have the money in all instances to do the real thing. So they do RC, which is like the next best thing. And they treat every dollar as if it was actually a $100 bill instead of a $1 bill. And, you know, like, oh, I'm not going to spend $25 on a sticker sheet. That's ridiculous. You know, I mean, it's like, we've heard it all. And
Yeah.
they don't associate any kind of like value to your time or anything like that. And I think it's because that group of people, for whatever reason, are just really ignorant when it comes to business in general, or how things work, or going through the proper channels. I don't know what it is about RC that customer base just doesn't know how to act right when it comes to resolving problems and things like that. It's a really strange customer base to be involved with, because it's not like any other business that I've worked in. The people
Not
are
at all.
just kind of on their own little level compared to everybody else. You know, I've worked in the RV and marine industry. I've worked in real estate. I've worked in the motorcycle industry, and I have never encountered the entitled people, or the people that are just straight up kind of clueless and dumb when it comes to processes, manufacturing,
Yeah.
business practices.
I mean, dude, I
There's
did
just
cinema
nothing
equipment.
like it.
You know,
our-
like, yeah. Like,
yeah, I
it's
mean,
just crazy. Like, it's just for people
it's
with
just
the money
the
to burn,
RC
it's
customer is just in a completely different world than everybody else.
I actually don't 100% agree with that. I
And I
think
think,
that
and
just
this is bad, but I mean, it's like, I think a lot of it's because, yeah, it cut out. I didn't hear anything you said.
Go
I
ahead,
stopped
Adam. He has
because
a delay.
okay.
I
Yeah,
didn't hear
no,
what
what
you
I was
said. It
going to
cut
say
out.
is well, that's because I paused because you were still talking. No, I was gonna say I don't 100% agree with it's just the RC. I think it's actually just the society as a whole now, because I mean, if it's not RC, if it's like a restaurant, if it's a place you're buying goods from, whatever it is, if it's like almost like trying to think, it's like back in the like I don't know, the medieval days, like where everyone wanted to stand out with a pitchfork, and it's like I think that's like the mentality everyone's going to, because they think that just because you have social media or you have this platform where you can get on and say what you want means that everybody wants to hear what you have to say about this, that, and the next thing. Because I know like the invention of the app, or whatever you want to call it, next door, was to kind of like get you involved in your neighborhood if there was problems or activities or whatever, to get people to come together.
And
Well,
that
now
place is a cesspool now.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
just it's just like, for lack of better words, it's a total bitch fest. Everybody gets on there and they go, oh my gosh, this person walked by my house and they let their dog crap all over my lawn and didn't pick it up. Do you recognize this person? Or, oh my gosh, I saw two cops with their lights on parked over here. Does anyone know what's going on? And then like you get the people that are like, they answer those ones and they're being totally sarcastic, or they're being serious, or a little bit of both. And it just starts like a whole whirlwind of crap. And it's like, and that's how all these like rumors and stuff starts. But it's like, I see the same thing with that. Like it's, I think it's just the modern age of just having social media or a place to just kind of like vent, at a moment's notice, is what's created, where we're at. Because it's I think people truly are waiting for their moment where they're like, oh, look, this company screwed me over in their eyes. And they're like, this is my moment to shine. I'm going to post this and I'm going to have everybody behind me going, yeah, 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 with their pitchforks and their torches. And they're like, we're going to just like follow this person. And then it's like, you get one of two responses. You get one person that comes on and it'll say that. And you might get somebody in your comments that are like, really? Are you like seriously coming to do like it's stupid? And then you get the other half that are like behind them cheering them on, and it's like that's what creates this whole toxic society that we're in now.
I agree to a certain point. Like, yes, like that is a prevalent issue, but I think it manifests more in some areas than others. And like when you're like an e-commerce vendor, a lot of it gets taken out on you. But I think a lot of it too is like, again, what is it like? What's the market? I don't know how I did this. Obviously there's a reasonable chance I didn't. The guy was pulling a fast one on me, but the only reason he would have been doing that is if he messed something up on the install. I shipped a guy an empty plastic bag back in June. Sent me an email like, hey, like I didn't get the things. I was like, hey, I didn't get the scales I ordered. Like, could you guys send those out? And I was like, yeah, like, but I always ask for a picture, right? Because I'm just like, again, I'm hesitant. I asked for the picture and he sends me the whole like open package and everything with it, where it's like the bag is just sitting there and I'm like with the packing slip and I'm like, I have no idea how I did that. Like, yep, ship the replacement priority mail. If I would have done that with SOR, that would have been like 3 Facebook group posts before we would have heard anything.
Oh,
like
yeah.
I would put money on that for sure.
Absolutely.
Like in these like Facebook collector communities and everything like that like I'm selling this stuff to is way larger than anything you see in RC, right? Like this guy totally could have just threw me out a new one. And I just don't run into people like that. And I think that a hard part of it too is, to your point though, is that like when you're buying something through a checkout screen and your interaction is through the screen, like all the humanity is taken out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Good example of this, right? Heard a story a while ago where like the point was like at the rate that people process information now, but like I heard a story a while ago where like someone was watching a dog, lost the like watching a dog for the weekend, lost the dog got out. He posts on Nextdoor. Everybody is super fucking unhelpful on Nextdoor and is just shitting on him for losing the dog and everything else and stuff like that. So he goes out and he puts flyers out all around the neighborhood instead. Found the dog in 2 hours. Right? Just from the flyer. Someone picked up the phone and called. And it's just like no one that was going to interact with him on that app was going to have any level of this, like any sort of level of care. And again, part of it too is a lot of people say a lot of things when they don't have to tell them to you in person.
Oh yeah.
Right. Like that's the whole thing. Like comment sections exist for a reason, whereas like these are just not conversations people would have in real life because the conversation would not last that long.
No.
That's, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and
people
that's a
have a
whole other
lot less
piece of it
teeth
too.
walking around.
They email. I mean, but
Yeah,
God, like, one thing, sorry. But so this is my main counterpoint, which again, like this was the attitude. It was much worse in racing, I think, than crawlers, to be fair. 2014 going into 2015, there was a race we always had called Cabin Fever. That was basically the start of our 8th scale season. So we would go drive over to Lewiston, Idaho. We would have that. And so obviously, since it's the turn of the year and we had sponsored drivers at the time, everybody wanted shirts and stuff like that. I don't remember the exact request, but this guy, local fast guy, which, you know, of course, then means he's on top of the world, asks for like 4 free shirts by Cabin Fever, you know, like 3 months away. And I'm just like, well, 1, no, they're not going to be free. 2, like, no, we're not going to do that. And then he says, all right, see you at Cabin. Blocks me on Facebook. I'm going to see this guy in 3 months. And he's like, yeah, like, cool, like, blocked. See him at the race, like won't even look at me kind of thing because I wouldn't do this for him. And there's no preface. There's no part I'm leaving out. Like that's the level here, right? Where it was just like, this is the expectation. When same thing, like we had a pro driver, you know, in his manager or some shit. I don't know what that was about. Like just
that was ridiculous.
I'll say it, nut swinger, right? Like contacting us on his behalf, who by the way, like this guy, like, is what on the verge of getting dropped. Like asked us for 8 like free hoodies, shirts, all this stuff, and everything else.
$1,200 worth of stuff.
$1,200 worth of stuff.
And he didn't even take the time to introduce himself in his email. It was literally like a list of demands and fucking it.
Because I met
Not
this
like,
guy
hey, I'm
once
so
in
and
person.
so.
Yeah. And I'm just like, cool, like, no. And they were like dumbfounded. by us saying no.
Oh,
Like,
dude,
there's
I
nowhere
lit
near
them
this is
up.
worth
I
it.
was like, I was just like, who do you guys think you are? You know, like,
Yeah.
what
Racing
is
was
this?
much
You know,
worse about this. Like, no one ever wanted to pay for anything. Everyone wanted to be on the team, and then you were going to get everything free. And so I'm like that. So the
and then
crawler
they wanted
experience has
stuff
been
for
much
their
better.
kids, and they wanted all their kids' shirt staff. The
God,
problem,
yeah.
and this is what I was getting at before we started getting into, before Adam said what he did.
Yeah.
It with the crawler guys, and this is kind of a little bit of a generalization here, but the majority of the crawler guys that I have encountered out on the trail and customers and stuff like that can barely afford to be even in this hobby to begin with. And they make that everybody else's problem but their own. There was one guy, for example, that we had the shipbox edition decal kits that we had on our store, and he's local, and he messages me and he's like, hey, you know, the shipping on it's a lot, you know, you just sell it to me on PayPal, and you know, I'm PayPal ready, I'll just pay you right now. And I was like, no, you can order it through the website and I'll refund you whatever the difference is on shipping. It's like, well, the shipping is only going to be like 25 cents. I was like, shipping hasn't been 25 cents in fucking 10 years, dude. So
Yeah.
first of all, no, I will refund you the difference, but all transactions for bookkeeping purposes, taxes, everything goes through our store. We track our sales. I know that you don't understand any of that stuff. And the dude just did not understand that, and has just taken that as a personal slight ever since. Because I just straight up told him, I was like, no, dude, I'm not going to do. And this is literally a $5 sale, and he's treating it like, you know, it's this big purchase. And he's like, man, I'm PayPal ready right now. I'll PayPal you right now.
That's
like,
that's not worth it.
No. I mean, I've already lost any money I would have made on this by spending, you know, 15 minutes bickering back and forth with you because you don't have enough money in your account to cover the shipping and then get it refunded. You know, and this dude doesn't have a job. He lives off of welfare. Just kind of a real scumbag to begin with. But like, there's just so many people like that I've encountered that are just kind of like in RC crawling, like a lower class than a lot of other hobbies and interests. And they can barely afford to be doing what they're doing to begin with. But like I said, they want to make that your problem. You know, it's your problem that they don't have money, not the other way around. I mean, and back to what Travis was saying with racing, we had another guy that wanted to have his wife sponsored, and he flat out told us that we were going to go out of business because we turned him down to sponsor his wife. You know, he was like, this is your opportunity to blah, blah, blah and everything. And I was just like, yeah, no, we're not going to. And just
as soon as
good luck, you guys are going to fail. And I mean,
as soon as it starts getting to the point of the conversation, they start pitching you on why this is a good idea. And it's just like, no, like, sorry, like, no, the answer is no. Like, I don't know what that's so hard. And it's not even that it's like, this is the majority of crawling or RC and anything like that. But it's just that, like, when you're in the position that we are, like, it's just that that's who you end up spending the most time with, is the people like with this, that create this sort of frustration, which is super unfortunate because, like, you want it, like, that's not what you would hope for. Like, you would want it to be like a really positive experience and do your best for people, but it just seems to always ring so hollow because it is just like, I don't know. One thing I'll just say again, because like, I don't like, I'm not just coming from a place of like, well, I'm like bitter about it or anything, but it's just like the same effort, work, whatever that I put into anything else, and the gratitude I receive back, right, in a world where no one is grateful for fucking anything, I just never, like, it is reciprocated so much lower here for a lot of different reasons. But that's again, like, if you're in this position where like this is something you're thinking about, like, that's just what you have to think about. The other thing though too, again, RC exacerbates this, is, and we've been resistant to it, and again, like, you could maybe say that this was a mistake, is the team thing, and the way that has influenced the RC economy is a really important data point on this as well. And I know we're running long, so I'll keep this brief, but that's a whole other thing too, where it's like, cool, like, someone likes your stuff, like, they like what you're making, brand, whatever, like, think you're a nice guy. They're like, cool, can I be on your team and get my 25%, 30% discount, whatever it is, for some people like that. And obviously, like, yeah, we've had to do that at times too. But that makes it so much harder then, right? Because then it's like that's why the teams exist, is like, that is a customer acquisition strategy. It's not like there are few people, take like an Adam, for example, who like for MKS and everybody else, like does the job, is worth the effort. 90% of them, regardless of what you say, and I'm sorry, but this is just true, like 90% of any team drivers that would probably be listening to this are just like you guys like, no, like you are an acquired customer. Like that's why you're on the team, is because you are.
Yeah, you are contracted customers.
Because if you can guarantee a certain level of sales from, even if it's discounted, it's just like it's revenue you wouldn't have had before, because that is the difference between some people just running your brand or not, to say, can I get a deal on it? And like, look, I, I'm not sitting up here in my ivory tower saying this. I had to do the same thing for a decade, right? Like I had my own interests. That's just reality. So it's just like, that's the whole other thing too, is to then be a brand where you're like, I'm not going to do that. And we're just going to sell what we sell. And, maybe we have a different, wholesale channel or something like that and everything. You're like, yeah, like obviously like that's what we've done. It has resulted in less customers, plainly. We probably would have sold more if we had done that. But also too, it was just like we, for a lot of different reasons, we were just like, we just don't want to do this. It's just, we didn't like what came.
It was a huge time suck. I mean, it was just,
we're not the type of business that was built for that. Like, to be fair, like products, decals and everything like that. Like we were not a good fit for that kind of thing. And that's why we've not done it. And it didn't make sense to isolate it to the parts, because it's just like, unless you were doing multiple rigs, they're just one-time buys. Right. And I know that's true for a lot of RC, but it's just like, we don't sell wear parts generally. So, that like, those are things you have to think about too. But I like that, on top of everything else we've talked about, like that's the final nail, is like, okay, but then like, are you going to need sponsored drivers? Because then the whole shape of this is different. And that's where like, it's a lot of different things you have to think about. I didn't, as we wind this down, like I didn't want this to turn out so negative, to be fair. Like I wanted this to be like kind of a nuanced thing, but it was just like to be fair, it's been a lot of ass beatings we've received for kind of no reason for a long time over stuff like this. And it's just like, I understand vendor customer relationships. But like, this is my point making of just like, you forget we are just like you, doing what we can to survive in this world kind of thing. Like I don't need your horse shit too. We don't need we're not doing favors. Like it's not going to benefit us. And that's the hard part, is like, very rarely does anybody ever like make that worth your while for you, unfortunately. And and to Adam, to your point, that is kind of society today, but it's definitely materialized in our experience with this.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons why I was just completely against continuing on with having a team is the amount of babysitting that goes into it. I mean, we had situations where, a team driver he was running a chassis protector from somebody else, never even approached us or anything. And he's like, oh, I didn't know you guys had chassis protectors. Like, seriously, you didn't even take the time. You wanted to be on our team and everything. You didn't even take the time to familiarize yourself with the products that we make. Like, we sell a lot of chassis protectors. We were selling chassis protectors at the time through A-Main even, but it's like, instead you went to one of our competitors before you even talked to us about it. Like,
which then someone would say, yeah, which then obviously someone would retort and say, well, then why was he on your team? But then it's just like, you don't always have those things flushed out immediately. Like, people, when they try, are very good at presenting themselves and then giving you a very different version of that person.
Yeah, there's a level of trust that you're having to kind of give the benefit of doubt to people that they're going to do the right thing. And very seldom were people ever doing the right thing. And, I'm definitely happier not having team drivers anymore. There's been people on social media and stuff that will kick stuff down to or whatever, if it's a good fit or, they can help us promote something that we're interested in. But doing the team thing, honestly, it got to the point where it was just a joke. Like, there was one guy that wanted to be sponsored by us that had like 3 different chassis sponsors or some shit. I mean, like, it was so ridiculous to the point of where it was just laughable, and it's like, being a team driver used to be a prestigious thing, and it was something that you earned. And that changed once social media started getting popular, and it became, how many likes can you get, how, and it went from being like a skill thing to an exposure thing. And then with exposure comes, all the people that you are exposing the product to and putting it in front of, and offering these people a discount, of 25 or whatever, you're making that up in volume. And some businesses can handle that. Like, let's say Proline, for example. Proline can handle having, 15 guys on a team that all have a 25% discount. It's not that big of a ding because they're getting volume in turn of not getting, the full retail sale of each item. And like Travis said, your business has to be a good fit for the whole team thing to work. But it lost so much prestige once social media became so prevalent in this hobby that it's a lot of team drivers have that title with just zero merit behind it. And that's really not something we wanted to contribute to. I mean, with my background in moto and stuff, it was like, you don't get help unless you do good, like being a pretty face on social media and getting a lot of likes or editing a good video and stuff. It's like, that's not going to get you a contract with like Monster Energy or Troy Lee Designs or something. It's being the best that you can possibly be. And it's something that you earn. And that is something that has just gotten completely lost on the RC industry and isn't something we want to be a part of anymore.
Yeah. I think it's just on a human level though too, where it's just like at a certain point when I was like at the peak of my burnout, it was just like someone walks up to you at a tent and you're just like, what do you want from me? Cause it's just like anybody you thought that was like cool and like you want to have this like relationship with and stuff like that. Like, no, it turns out it was super self-serving the entire time when you asked nothing of them. And that's the whole other thing too. And then once you ask something of them, it's like, oh, like you're committing a cardinal sin. It's just like, well, like, you clearly you didn't read what I put in front of you. It's just, and that's the hard part is, again, it's like my intent in bringing all of this up was not to shit all over it, but it is something that I don't think is talked about enough, where it's just like, it's a hard spot to be in it. And it really conflicts with your ability to have fun in this hobby. I know that's like, it was always like a thing, like Chris Trudeau asked these questions and it's like, that was the running joke. It's like, well, is Travis ever going to have his build done? It's just like, well, motivate me, like, honestly, because it's just like when I get that done and everything else, it's just like, well, like everyone I show it to is like, oh, you get that part, oh, hey, can I get a discount on it? Like, well, and it's just, it takes a lot out of you.
I think that we should probably pick some of this up on another episode and kind of go more into depth, because I know like last year, I know it used to be like a thing where we tried to do like the sponsorship video or the silly season episode, and since we haven't, I think this is kind of like a good segue into doing another episode like that, where because clearly you two can talk about the sponsorship from a different level because you guys did sponsor people, and then also you guys have been on the receiving side of being sponsorees of companies. So I think that would be another good episode.
I think it would be fun. Yeah. What would be a fun thing is to talk about what we would like to see. Like, what if we could choose how this dynamic works in RC today, because it is going to exist. So if it were going to exist in RC today, like what would be optimal, where it's like, it's worth it for the, sponsorees, it's worth it for vendors. It's, the customer base, like it makes sense, where it's like the only customers that exist are sponsored. Like, I think that would be a fun way. Like, what are like some possible solutions to this instead of us just bitching, but mostly me just bitching. But like, I think that would be a fun prompt for it as well, where it's like, hey, like here's if we could do, like, if we just had like total choice and like blank piece of paper, like here's the template, like here's what we think would be awesome. 100%. No, I like it.
Yeah, it's to kind of wrap up what I was saying. Like like Travis said, we didn't necessarily intend for this to be like super negative, but at the same time, I think that people expect a certain level of honesty and realness from us, because we are fairly transparent with the stuff that we do and everything. When it was asked of me, how do I get into this industry what do I need to do and stuff. Like, I wanted to try and paint a really accurate picture because like I'm being really honest. I'm not being overly negative here, but like, you will have bullshit to deal with that you never would have ever imagined that you would have to deal with, and people saying and doing things that are just so out there and so bizarre. And that's something that I want to try and really be honest about people with, because it seems like everybody in RC, especially with crawling, wants to figure out some way to monetize it and make their hobby into a business. I get it. It sounds fun. It's an attractive idea. It is definitely not all it's cracked up to be. And I want people to have realistic expectations when they're thinking about entering this market. And it will definitely put you through the paces. It would have been great to have had Ty on this episode, Ty from Tekin.
Ty probably has
this episode.
Yeah, I would trade, like, I think he
that-
would probably trade a lot of his experiences.
He's been
for what
through
we
it.
had, for sure. Yeah, like that's way worse.
Yeah, that dude has been through it. I mean, to people like slandering them by like lighting an ESC on fire off camera and then showing it burning on camera. I mean, the amount of shit that they have gone through is just unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, just unbelievable. So I mean, I yes, RC is fun. Yes, it can be a great time. You can meet a lot of great people. We have met a lot of great people. We have a lot of really cool friendships that we wouldn't have had if had it not been for this hobby. But it is not a fun business to be in probably 80% of the time. It is a struggle, and you fight tooth and
At
nail
any level.
for everything that you have.
At any level. At any level. Like whoever's running Horizon is not like, you know, using $100 bills for toilet paper.
Yeah,
You know
I
I
guarantee
mean?
you,
That's the
whoever's
struggle,
running
right?
Horizon, they're not having a good time.
No,
Like,
no.
they're not having fun.
Like that's like top to bottom, this is what it's like for sure. And like
For everyone.
we are probably one of the less extreme cases of like how this has gone. 100%. And like, again, like here's my recommendation. My very personal experience is like, and this is like, as someone who, like, in terms of sequence, like I owe everything to RC. Like, take RC out of my life and like so many things do not happen. It had to happen. But if you're looking at it from like the business perspective, my recommendation would be do a business elsewhere, keep RC your hobby, because for the same amount of effort and pain and everything else you're going to go through, you're going to have a way better time in something else. 100%. The knife thing I'm doing is, for example, like over the moon about it. Super hard, super fun, super rewarding, is actually getting me more fired up about SOR again, because then it's just like, well, I can just have fun. Right? Like that's my thing. Like I don't have to, like, RC is not just like, oh, I just have to grind this out all the time. Like now it's like, you know what, actually I kind of want to go do this again. And like that's where I would recommend keeping it for sure. Like use this as your escape. Don't make it your everything, because it just gets so much harder to enjoy. 100%.
Yeah, very much so. Well, good. I think that was a good way to kind of wrap it up.
Yeah. We should definitely get into that then this next episode.
We're just trying to be real.
We should definitely get into that this next episode. We didn't get to talk about a man in Horizon like I kind of was interested in, but I think we can save that one for the next one too.
Okay.
Cool.
Any final words?
Cool. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in, and we will catch you next time.